Happy Friday, everyone. We're getting ready to do another masterclass as we enter into tax season. I'm a little congested this morning, so please forgive me. But also, please join us. If you have any questions, you can put it in the chat and stream. But I'm excited about this webinar, who we're have are having who's joining us to give us some insight on a couple of ways. So before we get started, Brandy, how are you? Welcome. Introduce yourself while we're waiting on the others to come in. And which
Thank you,
cohort
Miss
are
Paula.
you in?
Thank you so much, Miss Paula. How are you?
I'm wonderful.
Good. Yes, ma'am. I'm in the March cohort, and it's
Okay.
been wonderful, wonderful so far. Thank you and your team so much.
What's made it wonderful? Give us your background, where you're from.
Yes, ma'am. My background is healthcare, and I'm now in the transportation industry, trucking.
Mm-hmm.
And what has made the cohort so wonderful is that everything was so organized. From beginning. Before the classes started, everything was emailed and explained very well. The cohort started right on time and just got right into the meat of everything. So I've learned so much just from one day. So I'm very excited.
On the next couple of sessions, that's when the real work comes in. And
Yes,
people tend
ma'am.
to get overwhelmed, but it makes sense for you all to do the homework and the lab assignments. And what did you learn from your first session?
Well, from the first session, I learned so much about the government, things that I thought that I learned in school, like college. I didn't know there was things that I did not know that she broke down really to explain, like I guess the foundation of because it's government procurement, and she started with the foundation from the basic, and really explained it from from point A, which simplified it for me, which I'm glad she did it that way, and with explaining how it works from the time the president signs the budget to it going to Congress. It was very interesting. And so it was very interesting to learn the foundation. So that's the main takeaway, in learning why.
Mm.
The why part I think was very important. So
Yes, because everybody just want to come in and jump into contracts and go get registered,
hmm
Sam, go get your certification. But for me, you have to understand your buyer, your clients, understand how the
hmm
system operates. Now you can position yourself better in going after these opportunities. So thank you, Brandy, for your feedback. I'm
Oh,
going to
you're
go
welcome.
and jump in. It's 12:01. Hopefully the others who have signed up will go ahead and join us. But we are streaming live on Facebook. Before we jump into this, I always have to have my housekeeping. Again, we are GPI, your federal solution to federal contracting. Hold on. Always about networking, putting your information into the chat, areas of expertise. In the next week or two, we will be setting up a Facebook group for all the people who've completed our program so that we can still be able to connect and utilize each other's resources and skill sets. Always congratulating our first winners this year. Both of them were in the October class. She's actually won two contracts since starting GPI. So I am excited about where we're going and how we're going. On the 22nd, we're going to have Terrence Evans. He is a graduate of the 8A program, and he's been quite successful in this program, where he had almost 350 employees. And again, he likes to come back and give information to the community. He continues to mentor small businesses as he continues to grow his business. So I'm excited about him. On the 29th, where I will be interviewing Monique Carter. She was actually in the acquisitions branch at Georgia Power. And when you look at corporations and Georgia Power, which is Southern Company, they have to meet certain goals. That's where the MBE comes into play, the Minority Business Enterprise. Enterprise certifications. So she's going to break down from her perspective, how do you get in front of those corporations? How do you get in front of Georgia Power? What is the process, which is completely different than the federal government after speaking with her. She's also going to be drafting up a curriculum, just like GPIs, that's going to walk businesses into obtaining contracts. So make sure everyone signs up and joins for that March 29th cohort. Also, we have a self-pace now. You can go at your own pace, but we also allow you to come in and meet with the other cohort members during our weekly office hours and weekly lab sessions, which are held Tuesday and Thursday. If you know someone, again, that's still interested, I put the wrong one up, this March cohort, please have them to go ahead and if we still have slots open for the March class. It actually started March 6th this week. We're going to also be having a tour or participating in this conference on May 2nd. I will be moderating. I like to think of these young ladies as my babies. They've all grown up and been quite successful in this space. As many of you know, Labrisha has come back and talked about her $1 billion contract. I've interviewed Tanisha, and she talks about how she's won over $400 million in contracts. And most of you also know Stacy, who has both won a significant amount of government contracts, but she's also spun off and has a contract with Amazon. So all of us is about bringing everyone into the loop and understand how we can collectively play and win at this game. My NARAB family, they're hosting their regional conference here in Atlanta from May 2nd to the 24th. I'm always participating with them because what I found with the real estate industry, once you all remove that title, you all tend to be the most successful in this space. And today I am honored to interview Mr. Marquis Tate. He and I met I guess when I first started with SBA. Yeah. And I am so excited about the information that he's going to be able to share with us from two perspectives, his role in working with the Atlanta Black Chamber and the Advancing Black Business Inc. That's correct?
That is correct.
As well as his experience in purchasing a franchise, a tax franchise. So congratulations, Marquis. And let me pin you on here. What I like to open up is always with people's background so we can understand your journey and how you've navigated into the places and positions that you are currently in. So give us a little background, where you're from, a little bit of your career path.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Paula Watts and your organization GPI for inviting me on. Like you said, we have known each other for years, and we were actually at a an event what end of last year together. So definitely have rekindled our relationship, and you have grown so much. You have a wonderful organization, so thank you so much for your support over the years and your support of small Black owned businesses. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. With my background, from Tennessee, a rural West Tennessee. You may hear that little country twang come out from time to time. But I moved here to the Atlanta area where I live in Henry County in 2006. I started out back before I moved here. I was working for state government, so I was working in Tennessee State Parks as a park superintendent, and learned a lot about the inner workings of government. Learned a lot about how the contracts work from the governmental side, from a state perspective. And so I left there and came to corporate America right here with the Swan Food Company. I was a general manager for this area for the Swan Food Company, but I always had that entrepreneurial bug. And I decided that I wanted to be an entrepreneur during the downturn during the start of the recession, or really
Wow.
the better part of the recession, 2009. I left corporate America and started a small business. And was starting a small business, I got heavily involved in the business community with the Atlanta Black Chambers. So I'm going to be coming from two different fronts today. One is from my private business. Paula mentioned I'm into franchising, and I own Liberty Tax Service franchise locations all over Georgia and Tennessee. Have a total of 11. Thank you. Have a total of 11 locations. So it is quite busy. This is tax season. So I do want to briefly go over some small business tax tips. I do have a slide presentation. I'll be sharing the screen in just a moment. And then after that, I do want to talk to you about this is the State of the Union address was last night. Was heavily attuned to that last night in the Atlanta Black Chambers and advancing Black businesses. We talk about public policy. We talk about opportunities for small businesses. We talk about technical assistance and different activities for you to grow your business. So I'll be going over a presentation around the history of Blacks in public policy and what we do at the Atlanta Black Chambers in advancing Black businesses. So, so
Wonderful. You have a lot. So let's go back to the franchise because I'm not sure we have that many Black owned franchises under the tax business. How did that come about?
it came about some years ago when I was a starving and still somewhat of a starving entrepreneur, and I was looking for an opportunity to make money. And I had unsuccessful runs at a couple of different businesses, and met a guy that said, "Hey, I do taxes. You want to do some taxes?" Basically, just that simple. I said, I'm intrigued by that. I remember attempting back in when I lived in Memphis to start a tax business with my brother. And I'm working for state government. It didn't allow the time. So I started doing taxes, actually, Paula, in a McDonald's in Macon, Georgia. I put
Mm,
out some of those yard signs, and
hmm
I talked people into coming into one of the McDonald's in Macon, letting me file their taxes. So, and it grew from there. So that first year I was working out of a McDonald's, and next year I opened 6 privately held tax offices in several cities around Georgia and Tennessee. And from there, I worked at the small business private side for about 7 years. And I found that I had grown as much as I can grow on the private side. So I started looking at purchasing accounting firms. And I put a couple of bids in for a couple of accounting firms and was unsuccessful. And one of a good friend of mine and broker, Sylvester Ford, talked me into looking at franchises. So we started looking at a couple of different franchises. I came upon Liberty Tax Services. They had several company-owned locations that were up for sale in Georgia and Tennessee. So I decided to sell my private business and the offices and convert a few of them to Liberty Tax Services and combine that with buying some company locations. And here we are. I became one of the largest owners in the nation with Liberty Tax Service franchise locations.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. So it's quite challenging uh, as a business owner, just like it is for any type small business. You have having a franchise, you have support of a corporation, you have bought into a brand. So it's been a great experience for me. This will be my third tax season with Liberty Tax Services. So I'm looking forward to having a good closeout to the season.
So is Liberty Tax like HR block in a
Yes,
sense?
yeah.
Okay.
In a sense, there are three main franchise owned or corporations that have franchise locations. The number one is H&R Block. They own a substantial size of the market share. Number two would be Jackson Hewitt, and a close third is Liberty Tax Services. So there's three major brands, and then you have the privately held, we call mom and pop tax companies that actually have a 80% market share. Whereas
Wow.
three of our corporations have a 20% market share. And if you think about the restaurant industry and other industries in franchises, the franchises actually own the biggest part of the market share. So the tax industry is one of the few industries where the franchise side does not own the market share, the higher percentage of the market share. So it's challenging. It's very competitive in this industry, just like any other industry. But yes, we're the number three size company in the nation.
Oh wow. Oh wow. Um someone saying please mute your line. I've muted everyone. So I'm not quite sure what's going on. But how many employees do you have? And again, and as part of that tax service business, what do you offer under Liberty Tax?
Well, I have 35 employees. 11 of them are managers that manage 11 locations. We offer individual tax preparation. That's probably about 95% of our business is individual tax filers, whether they're single, they're married filing jointly, or they're self-employed. Because I want to explain that when you're self-employed, you have a business structure, and your structure is generally a sole proprietorship, single member LLC, or you're an LLC managed member, or you have a C Corp, C Corp. And if you're a single member, which most of our businesses or small businesses are single member LLCs or sole proprietorships, you actually file a tax return called a Schedule C with your 1040. If you are a C Corp, S Corp, or corporation incorporated, and you have what's called a board or a structure of a corporation, you file a full-blown business tax return, which in a lot of cases, that's either a 1120 or 1120S. If you are a nonprofit, you file a 990. And that's the thing about being a nonprofit, specifically a 501c3 or C6 or any 501 organization that's nonprofit. If you're making less than 50,000, you basically just have to fill out a 990 with basic information on it and make sure that you file that each year. Yes.
What are some of the common challenges you have in working with small businesses come tax season? What's the common thing that most small businesses tend to challenge or challenge with?
Yeah,
Mhm.
Paula, the common issue is just having your financial documents together and finalized. We get a lot of clients that come in with their documents, and we're really helping them come up with their totals. And we make those suggestions afterwards because you have to categorize all your expenses, all your receipts have to be totaled. And in a perfect world, we would love to see a small business come in with a P&L statement together, with a balance sheet, with all of their expenses listed on that P&L. It'll be an easier task, but being a small business owner, you are good at what your services or what your offering is. What we found is that it's very tough to be, on both sides, good at accounting, good at doing your taxes, good at coming up with all those totals and keeping up with it. But, there's some simple tools. There's QuickBooks. or any other online financial management system that will help you keep track. That'll be your best friend when it comes tax season, when it comes to closing out those P&Ls, closing out the balance sheets, and closing all those financial statements out, and coming over to one of my offices. We would, if you don't have it together, we will definitely help you recreate those situations and pull that P&L together, pulling all those expenses, and more importantly, that revenue, that money that you have made, and making sure that you file your tax return in the proper way.
And most, I think the common theme that a lot of small business try to think about is minimizing their tax liability. Therefore, a lot of times we take a loss, try to show a loss. I want it, and I'm guilty as most in the beginning. But you can't continue that mindset if you're going to be in business. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, in filing your taxes, at a loss or at a profit, actually decides on a lot of the reach of your company when it comes time to getting in front of banking partners or a bank and looking for a loan. So you definitely want to make sure that you're as profitable as you can as soon as you start as a small business owner. But we know starting out in a small business, it actually takes some time to build the revenue past those actual expenses that you have. And what you want to do is just make sure that you are joining, your local organizations, you're getting involved, you're networking, you're actually publicizing your service, you're doing marketing your service the best way you can. And actually, it generally takes a business anywhere from 2 to 5 years to start really turning a profit. So as you start your businesses, and those who are looking in that are in corporate America that are looking to start a business, keep your day job as long as you can, and make sure that you are financially stable when you go out and actually start that small business, because in some cases it's very tough, particularly starting out. The statistics show that most small businesses fail within the first 5 years. I think that's around 80, maybe up to 90% of small businesses, depending on the industry, fail within the first 5 years. So you got to be careful in what you do. You got to have everything together when you start that business. When I say everything, from that business plan to having a business checking account and separating your business from your personal, and connecting your business checking account with an online tool such as QuickBooks. That's what I use in my small business. So anytime that there's a transaction on the business side within your business account, it is actually recorded and transferred over to QuickBooks. And you have to categorize that. You have to actually close out your books out on a monthly basis. And that makes it a lot easier for you as a business owner when it comes time to tax time, which we're here now, for businesses that are full-fledged member managed businesses, C Corp. You have until next week, March 15th, to actually file your tax returns or file an extension. For the ones that are sole proprietor or single member LLCs, you have, just like the regular tax date, April the 15th to file your taxes with your personal taxes. So your business and personal taxes go together, and you'll need to file that before April 15th or file an extension. You don't want to go past not filing those extensions, because in some cases, even being a nonprofit, if you don't file that extension, you could get a fine as a nonprofit, or as a small business owner. You could receive a fine, particularly those that are filing a full-blown business tax return.
For me, and I'm a layman. I do what I do. When I started that first business, it was event planning. How would you recommend people on a small scale start preparing themselves and keeping those types of records? Because to me, I really hated accounting, all those little pieces of papers, and really beginning to understand how to read a profit and loss statement. For me, at the end of the year, it showed the profit and I owed taxes, but it always felt like I didn't really make that much money because you're still trying to grind.
Right.
So are there any suggestions that you would recommend to those just starting out? And how do we begin to structure that back office if you don't have the resources to hire a bookkeeper or accountant or someone in that area?
Mhm. Well, I would say educate yourself on best financial practices from online first, because starting out with a bookkeeper is definitely good to do, or an accountant to do, but in some cases you can't afford it starting out as a small business owner. So I would say educating yourself on the best financial practices for your small business. Save every receipt that you can. You want to have proof of those expenses. You want to actually total those out on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis. Again, those tools. I actually talk about QuickBooks a lot because that's what I know best, and that actually saves me at the end of the month, at the end of the year. I can pull my QuickBook documents up that I have categorized in various categories and pull that financial statement, which is such as a P&L. That will help out drastically. But just educate yourself, finding the tools that you can use best for your small business. Because once you start a business, it's hard to stop. You always, especially when you're starting out, you're more than likely starting out, as a self-employed person, and you want to grow into being able to hire those employees. But being able to hire those employees is knowing your books, making sure your books are together from an accounting perspective and from a taxes. Because when you make a profit, generally being self-employed, you're taxed around 15 to 16% of the profit. So if you think about, you profited $10,000, you're owing taxes at the end of the year, somewhere around $1,500. So when you're at the beginning stages of your business, you can get away with filing your taxes at the end of the year and paying based on your profits. But once you get into the substantial size at 50,000, at 100,000, at 200, 300,000 in revenue, you really want to start paying your taxes on a quarterly basis. And those would be estimated tax payments on a quarterly basis. Those estimates, because sometimes it come out to be more than you need to pay in, which will equal into a refund. When you go to file your taxes or complete filing your taxes, you can find that you have a refund because your estimated tax payments were over and above what your actual tax liability was based on your profit. In some cases, you do have a loss in your business. Generally, the first 3 to 5 years, you could experience having a loss, and you generally don't owe any taxes if you have a loss on your business. However, having a loss and getting a loan from, say, the SBA or some type of traditional bank or lending institution, if they see where you have a negative profit, it's going to be very, very hard to get any type financial resources from a traditional type lending institution like a bank. So just think about that as if you are, if you have a profit, make sure that you are claiming that profit, because that affects your everyday life. If you're a full-fledged small business owner and you're going out to buy a house, they want to see your business tax returns if you're a self-employed person. So if you're showing a profit, they're going to measure that profit on how much you can afford and how much of the size house that you can actually buy. So it affects your everyday life when you are self-employed, and how you profit or claim in your business.
How is there any tool? Because I'm horrible with these receipts. It's just all those little bitty pieces of paper. Is there any software that you can use? Because a lot of times I run my expenses through a credit card. Is that sufficient, or do I actually have to have a paper receipt for everything that I do through the business?
Well, you always need a paper backup, but there are, of course, some software out there. Again, I'm mentioning QuickBooks for the fifth, sixth time. The QuickBooks will allow you to take snapshots of your receipts. and it
Okay.
will actually categorize your receipts. And more importantly, it will attach that receipt to the actual business expense coming from either your bank account or your credit card. I don't have my business credit card connected to my actual QuickBooks. I need to do that. But what I generally do is do a journal entry into QuickBooks on my credit card, because I haven't wrapped my head around having the business credit card and the banking credit card together, because I generally have extra expenses that I have to categorize, because sometimes that's double counted when you go to actually pay that actual credit card. So I haven't got over that part of paying the credit card statement and going and actually reconciling that within my QuickBooks. So that's definitely, those tools can help you keep up with those receipts, and they definitely can help you keep up with those totals. So hopefully I'm answering that question, Paul. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to do a whole lot better because I just take those little pieces of paper and I just don't even think of it automatically. I need to do better in thinking about it automatically. Um, we have someone, I believe that's Miss Ellis. She's a member of ABC, and she says she loves you and thank you for
All right.
providing the tips.
All right.
Um,
Thank you. We love you too over at the ABC. Thank you for the membership. Really appreciate it.
um,
And Terrence Evans, you actually showed a slide with Terrence Evans. Definitely, he is a member of the chamber, and he is one of our largest employers in the chamber. So
wow.
he's doing some great things on the government contracting side. So, all
He
right. Want to mention that.
is. He is. And he always wants to give back. So that's what I love about Terrence. Um, Anybody have any questions as we at 12:30 as it relates to the taxes preparation and what you should do to prepare before either the March 15th or the April 15th deadline? I'll open that up to anyone. And I
Hi,
think
Miss Paula.
hi,
How are
yes,
you?
I'm good. How are
Um,
you?
Good, good. I had a question regarding QuickBooks. I'm not sure if you saw it or not. So which tier is it? I know there's multiple tiers in QuickBooks. So if I have multiple bank accounts, does one QuickBook account, which tier handles that better? Because I know there's different tiers.
Well, depending on the size business you have, there's a basic online version. I think that will probably be sufficient to start out with, because you can add several bank accounts uh,
Okay.
to that actual. So start out with the online. There's a couple of different versions. There's a self-employed, there's the online, there's a desktop, and then there's the enterprise version. So I would say start at the lower tier. Either, as I said, the online, but either the self-employed or the online should be
Okay.
sufficient for you. But look at those actually services that they have. You can go on the website and compare services on the various levels and pick out the one that you think that best suits you, and connect those bank accounts to that, because that's going to save you a lot of time when it comes to closing out either at the end of the month or especially at the end of the year. And you're going to see those profit or loss statements are there. It's going to be a few adjustments that you'll have to make, such as the uncategorized expenses, because you got to
Right.
categorize all of your expenses. Because when you go to get in front of a lender and they see that uncategorized section, they're going to question that. And I think there's a problem with the P&L. So that's something to think about.
Okay, because I've been flirting with QuickBooks for years. I mean, for a while now. I haven't really dived in yet. So, okay. And what's the difference between that, you said basic and self-employed? Is there any major differences and pros and cons?
Well,
Vers-
there are various services. The higher you go up to the ladder, again, the self-employed is the lowest level, and they have various services as for accounting, financial statements, and then as you go up the ladder to the online version, desktop, or the enterprise version, there's more that you can actually do, and
Okay,
more accounts and more things that you can actually attach to it, and more reports you can actually pull from QuickBooks.
okay. And what, I'm sorry, one more last question. Is QuickBooks retroactive? Can it go back like in 2023? And
Yes,
oh,
attaching your bank account to QuickBooks allows you to go back in prior years.
awesome.
So as and in some cases, depending on the version that you actually start with, it can go back a year or two, depending on the version and depending on your banks and bank statements. And in some cases, you can pull your bank statements and upload those bank statements into the system also, and it can actually categorize or actually pull it into the system that way. And in some cases, it may, or I'll say may not, pull those prior years, but you can always pull those statements and turn them into, I think it's an ESV, if I'm right about that, financial statement or Excel statement, and you can
Oh,
actually
yes,
build that
CSV.
into the system. Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for that information. I think I'm sold.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Great. Great.
And Marquis, can you go ahead and put your information in the chat in case folks need some assistance with their taxes this year? I'm all
Sure.
about supporting Black-owned businesses and begin to make sure we take care of each other. So you put that information in the chat.
Yeah.
And I'm also excited about what you all are doing with the chamber as well as the Advanced Black Business.
Mhm.
Because a lot of times, and I'm glad Brandy synopsized our first session, we don't necessarily connect the policies, the legislation to our everyday life and how that impacts us as Black business owners. So, can you share a little bit more on that?
Yes, on the Atlanta Black Chambers, and Paul, I just put my information in the chat. I put
Okay.
my cell phone in the chat, and that's because I don't have having 11 offices, I don't have just the general number
Okay.
to send out. So that's why I put my cell phone in there, and you can actually call or text, and I can actually we'll be getting back to you if I don't answer the phone or the text on a reasonable manner. But now, Paul, so your question was about the Atlanta Black Chambers, is that right? Okay.
Atlanta Black Chambers and the Advancing Black Business, because all of it to me sort of still ties into one. So if you can give a little bit background on what you all do in the Atlanta Black Chambers, as well as what you all are doing from the legislation perspective under the Advancing Black Business.
Okay. Right.
Mhm.
And what I may do, Paula, as I talk, I may be pulling up in just a moment my slide presentation, and I like going
Okay.
over, the history and where we are as Black businesses, where we are as a community. Because with the Atlanta Black Chambers, I've been involved with the Atlanta Black Chambers since, let's say, 2010. I actually started out as a member, and I'm in the process of sharing my screen. I'm gonna go over some things about the Atlanta Black Chambers, advancing Black businesses. So Atlanta Black Chambers is our 501c6 organization that is the flagship of all three of our organizations. It started the Atlanta Black Chambers back with our founder and president emeritus, Michael Hill, January 2nd, 2005. So we've been in business for some time as a 501c6. Our 501c6 is heavily involved in business, community, and government. Our mission is to serve as an advocate for the creation and growth of competitive, profitable, and sustainable Black-owned entities. We're an organization that is built through our committees. We have many, many different committees. Our committees start with the Financial Services Committee, the Health and Wellness Committee. We have a Governmental Affairs Committee. We have several affinity groups from our Women's League, which is a very strong group within our organization. We have a North and South Metro group because we cover the full Atlanta metropolitan area. So we do events, of course, in Atlanta, centered around the Gathering Spot and the Rice Center, the Russell Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurs. But we do events outside of the metropolitan area on the north and south end. We have our affinity groups that actually do their own activities on the north and south end of the metro area. But we're basically an organization and many organizations that have other opportunities and concerns that we have to tackle. One of that is public policy. And that's where, I lay my head is on public policy. I told you that I started out working in state government and got heavily involved in the political and the public policy process in Tennessee. So I brought a lot of that here with me from Tennessee to this great mecca of the city of Atlanta and Atlanta metropolitan area. So a couple of years ago, 2021, we started a 501c4, which is a social welfare nonprofit to educate and advocate in that public policy space. We work at the local, the state, and the federal levels. We actually look at opportunities that we can actually garner within that public policy space that will bring more outcomes or more positive outcomes when it comes to contracting, for example. You have a wonderful contracting organization that's doing some great work. And we want organizations like yours, the Atlanta Black Chambers, to have better outcomes when it comes to getting contracts at the end of the day. That's what it's all about with our organizations, is getting, access to opportunities, getting those opportunities and having those opportunities turning to positive outcomes on the side of access to capital. So with the 501c4, we educate Black business owners and Black consumers on training opportunities and activities to create awareness in that public policy process. We look at determining issues that matter best for our community, and we actually survey our community to come up with the best practices and better ideas, and actually strengthen the public policies and actually come up and write actual public policies. Paula, our organization has written a few pieces of legislation at the Gold Dome. We just had crossover this past week. We have written legislation around contracting, the study committees around contracting, where we are at the state level with contracting, because we only have one official study back in 2016, is this disparity study at the Department of Transportation, and it shows that we're receiving less than, really far less than 1% of the contracts, at that level. So, there's a particular, history in our community. And Paula, when we met at the event several months back last year, I went over the history of how we participated in public policy. So I want to go through that kind of quickly, just to know where we stand as Black people in America. When we look at the 17th to the 19th century, we participated in what was called slavery and racial discrimination. That ended in and around that 64, 63, 65, where we deprived individuals from basically getting paid from their own labor and preventing us from actually building an economic base and economic floor. Going into the Reconstruction era and the Freedmen's Bank, we had 40 acres and a mule that you probably heard of, and the Field Order 15, which gave us land from Charleston, South Carolina, all the way down to Jacksonville, about 30 to 40 miles in coastland and that was taken away from us. So that takes us to the 1900s and the 1920s and the modern day, the old modern day civil rights movement started back in the 1930s and 40s and really took off into the 60s. But there were several pieces of legislation throughout that time, from the Federal Housing Administration to the Homeowners Loan Corporation, and what we know of today as redlining actually started and was sanctioned. It started on the private side in the 1920s, and the federal government actually started to make that official policy. And it basically that really did not give us a chance to garner really economics and gain economics, and which created the racial wealth gap through the Social Security Administration Act, the Fair Labor Standard Act, into the Civil Rights era and the modern and today. And within the Civil Rights era, we had the Homestead Act that generally started in 1862. And if you remember, famous speeches and really clips on social media where Dr. King is talking about America was giving away millions of acres of land in the Midwest. Well, that started in 1862 and actually lasted all the way to the early 70s that they were giving away land through the Homestead Act. And then you had the GI Bill in 1944. So all of this, including the interstate highway system that was started, was created and destroyed our Black business districts. And you had the affirmative action program, Paula, which is been under attack for many years, really since it started. Lyndon B. Johnson started the modern day affirmative action that we have today that was struck down in the college admissions in the Supreme Court. And I'm trying to speed up because I know we're going to run out of time, but you had the war on drugs in the 70s, and the mass incarceration actually really kicked off back in the 70s with that war on drugs and drugs that were brought to our community. So that's not a myth. Drugs were actually planted in our community on purpose. Going all the way to the 1980s to the deregulation. Here we go with that access to capital and predatory lending and in the financial markets and the subprime mortgage crisis. And I continued in the 21st century of continued economic disparities all the way up to the Great Recession in 2008. So just to speed this along, 2020 was the COVID actually started in March of 2020, and it devastated our Black businesses. You look at the Black massacres. This is a popular slide right here of Black massacres all over America. And you look at in Philadelphia in 1985, that was one of the last recorded of the modern day time of that type Black massacres. I know you guys have seen this before, but just continue to just remember the resilience of our community. And there's several books there, The Color of Law, The Color of Money, that talks about a timeline that puts all of this together in one actually book. And actually you can educate yourself on there from back of the hiring line is Roy Beck actually talks about, what happened to us in the labor market from the 1900s all the way up until today, and how we participated in those labor lines. You have From Here to Equality by Sandy Derry. That's a book about reparations for Black Americans in the 21st century. Thomas Piketty talks about income inequality and wealth inequality in general, and talks about it's live and real. Going on to the number of Black firms, getting to you as Black business owners. I want you to know where you stand with the average sales at $62,000 for Black businesses compared to whites, $570,000 almost. So there's not only a racial wealth gap, there is a business wealth gap also that has some racial undertones with it. You heard a lot about the racial wealth gap, where the racial wealth gap comes from this chart, which comes from the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances. And if you look at that third column where it says Black, so this is in trillions, this talks about how much real estate we own, how much in consumer durables that we own, how much we have in stocks and bonds. And that middle section, defined benefits and pension and entitlements, and pension entitlements defined. That is the highest part of our wealth, is our pensions that our baby boomers and up are actually receiving. And that's why you have that road to zero wealth. They talk about 2053. A lot of that is because our wealth is not within real estate. It's not in stocks. It's heavily within pensions. And that's why, and you know what happens, Paula, when we pass away, those pensions actually pass away with us. Those pensions are not carried to the next generation. Right, here's a chart, and I'm gonna speed this up, Paula, because I know we maybe run out of time. A chart that shows how the racial wealth gap is widening and it's not getting narrow at all. And this actually shows a couple of different points along this. And the racial wealth gap was actually coined by a guy named Thomas Shapiro back in the early 90s. And the first wealth information actually started in the 80s. and they started really charting this. So you see that chart of the white wealth, you see how that's actually going up. You see this dip right here, that was the recession. And you see this dip right here, that was a start of the actual COVID-19 pandemic. So there was a dip. And in all of those dips, Paula, what has happened is public policy has swooped in and kind of buoyed and actually lended a helping hand, I call it. And you had the CARES Act, the American Rescue Plan, that put billions, really trillions of dollars into the economy. I know some of us experienced getting PPP loans and EIDL loans. So you had, the public policy or the federal government had to come in and actually save America with putting money into the stock markets and the futures and buying stock and dividends and throwing that in from the Federal Reserve. But during that time, 41% of the businesses actually closed within the first 3 to 4 months of the pandemic. And you see the numbers for whites at 17%. And a lot of that had to do with you're living off of the wealth that you had, because it wasn't many people working during a small period of that time, and nobody was really going out of their houses. But that's the road to zero wealth. You probably have heard of we're going to go to zero wealth by 2053. That's where it comes from this report, the road to zero wealth. The Legislative Black Caucus, the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus, is the largest Black caucus in the country. They have come up with a contract with Black America. You're going to start hearing more about that as we move through this election season, and that talks about just various ways that we can actually get out of this rut that we're in through public policy. My information comes from the census, from Prosperity Now, and ADOS Advocacy Foundation, and those various entities are doing a great job with putting out data, especially the census and Prosperity Now putting out that road to zero wealth report. So that's my contact information on the chamber side from the AtlantaBlackChambers.org. Check us out. We have many different events and activities throughout the year. We have a capital readiness program, Paula, that has the cohort program is actually kicking off on March the 20th, and that's by way of the Minority Business Development Agency, which is in DC underneath the umbrellas of the Department of Commerce. We received a grant in partnership with the United States Black Chamber, which is our national organization that represents us in DC. And there's the website to advancingblackbiz.org, our public policy advocacy organization that works closely with the with the Atlanta Black Chambers. And we have a statewide organization called the Georgia Coalition of Black Chambers, which is a group of 12 other chambers and Black business associations that actually work in and around the state on your behalf as a Black business owner. So that's it. Thanks a lot.
Wow. Wow. The truth hits us right in our face. Oh man, the numbers don't lie.
Don't lie.
So as that organization, how do you all begin to impact with the legislation to try to make a change with the policies and what's happening here in Georgia?
Well, Paula, we concentrate at the state level on state level policies and bills and laws. We actually look at what's going to affect the small businesses in general at first. We look at the contracting levels. We write our own legislation, as I mentioned. We generally are looking at basically creating an atmosphere where we're friendly to contracts, or contracts are friendly to us, and that we are having sometimes are forced to pick sides when it comes to public policy, when it comes to actually what's best for our community. And I always say, look at the data, look at where look at the history and how we have participated in this public policy process. And we look at all of those different practices and ideas, and we educate our Black business owners on that. We actually have a Thursday public policy talks every Thursday at 8:30 a.m. We're talking about what's going on in America, what's going on in Georgia, what's going on in the city of Atlanta when it comes to public policy. We talked for 30 minutes. This past Thursday, we talked about contracting levels at the federal level. You know, Paula, we monitor a lot of different data points, but 1.67% of the contracts are going to Black businesses at the federal level. That was in 2020. In 2021, that actually dropped down to 1.60%. And in 2022, the latest numbers that they have out is it dropped down to 1.55%. So even after the executive orders by the president mandating that there's an increase of 15%, contracts are going to small businesses, we have somehow slid back a few tenths of a point, and we don't have many points anyway, so we don't want to lose any ground. So we're sounding the alarm now that we have to get involved in this public policy political process as Black business owners, because we know we have our own voices. When we have our own businesses and we're not working for anyone else, you can have a true voice about your community. So we're sounding the alarms that we have to get involved in this political process. This is an election year. So the president and the candidate on the Republican side will be in the state of Georgia tomorrow and Sunday. So hey, let's make our voice heard, Black business owners. We can actually really make a difference and getting more opportunities for us through public policy.
I agree totally. Because my passion, my heart has always been with the 8A program, which originally was set up for Black-owned businesses in the 60s. And what they've done is slowly chopped out the benefits. And I realized that when I left the DC area and went to Pennsylvania, and then when I moved here to Atlanta, what I realized was there's only 200 businesses in the entire state of Georgia that's in the 8A program.
Got it.
Something is wrong.
Definitely.
I refuse to believe that we don't have more than 200 Black-owned businesses. And again, that 200 includes other ethnic groups that could qualify into this program. So what's happening and what's frightening for me was that affirmative action.
Yeah.
That's the beginning. When they rolled that back, even though it was with the school, immediately a lawsuit was issued against SBA and the 8A program.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it's like we need to get the mindset that we're in a fight for our life,
We are.
for our children's children. And I don't feel that sense of urgency that we should have as others. As I say with Martin Luther King, there was a mobilization of us being able to collectively come together and say, no, we're not doing this. We're not going to ride your bus. We're not going to do certain things, which allowed us to get in the door. So what are some of the things do you see that we could potentially do to try to fight back what's happening? The writing's on the wall. They're telling us.
Yeah, the writing's on the wall. When you analyze those lawsuits and those cases, from the agriculture case with the loan forgiveness, which was really for Black farmers a couple of years ago. You look at the Supreme Court case with the admissions. You look at even what our great judge, Supreme Court Justice Tanji Brown Jackson, stated within that admissions case. She talked about, she compared legacy admissions, which is not under attack at these schools, to our legacy in America. And she talked about us being, while your fifth generation was going to Harvard, we were coming out of slavery and we were coming out of Reconstruction. And she basically said that should count for something also. And she called us, we were somewhat descendant, or we were descendants of slaves. So if you look at the writing in the lawsuits and the cases, even the case, there was a case that came out this week against a minority business development agency, saying that there was a lawsuit saying that you can't help people based on race. And it actually was upheld by the U.S. Federal District Court in Texas. But Judge Pittman stated that this is basically not a narrow enough thing. I can't even say thing, but it wasn't a narrow enough remedy to fix the problem. And the same thing in the agriculture case, they were fighting against because it was too broad and you were helping everybody with white men. So that's telling us, and this is time for the Black community and our Black leaders, our organizations to get on offense instead
Yes.
of defense. We definitely want to fight saving that 8A program, but we also want to start look in some other areas. And that is, we got to start looking at what I call lineage-based solutions. The ADOS group actually talks about that a lot. And that's where we got to talk about our resilience. We are descendants of slavery, and that's our resilience. They tried to take us off the map after slavery and during Reconstruction, but we are still here. You know, I just showed the numbers of $62,000 in business. We are still here. We are still fighting. We are growing our businesses, but it's going to take definitely some kind of public policy shift, because public policy put us in this rut that we're in, and public policy is going to have to get us out. And we just got to start getting on the offense and talk about narrow remedies, narrow solutions, and we can actually talk about that. That's what I'll be talking about on our Tuesday talks, is about narrow remedies, what we can do to fight where we are, where our stance is in this America, because we are more American than anybody out here. We have fought in every war in America. We have been on America's side when America wasn't on us. So we are truly, you know, the American patriots of this land, and we gotta you know, embrace that. And actually look at, you know, solutions that are going to actually help us first. And we got to be selfish, you know, moving forward. We definitely need those allies, but we got to start being more selfish, making sure our vote truly counts. And when we go out and cast our vote, we have gotten those commitments from those candidates. They know what our true Black agenda is, and they have committed to that. And if once they get in office, we hold them accountable. And if they don't do anything in that first term, it's time to let them go. It's time to not vote for them again. And I'll close with this. We can't continue to be scared to the polls because of one candidate is going to put us in chains. And you say one candidate can't really do anything for us. So we can have actually positive outcomes from this public policy. But again, these candidates can do something for us specifically. We just got to get in the right framework. We got to have our leaders in DC have to be talking about the right things. They have to be representing us first. And that's what we truly need. And I'll end on this. You know, before the 1970s, or just around 72, 73, the early 70s, we had just under 200 elected officials that looked like us, that were representing us. Now we have well over 10, 11, 12,000 elected officials represent us. We have the numbers, y'all, to really turn the tables through public policy. We got to push our elected officials, local, state, our national elected officials, to actually do what's best for the Black community. And they will do it. We just got to push them, y'all. We already vote in a block. We already vote in that strong block for one particular party. We just got to make sure that we get those commitments before we go out and actually exercise and vote in that block, because that's very, very strong as a community to vote in a block. It's just that we got to do the work before we go out and cast that vote and get those commitments, and to have really a true Black agenda and ask for those things that we truly need. And I'll end it there.
Thank you. And I was motivated to see, I want us to have the same energy as the current president said that we had with the predecessor, and lining up. I saw everybody lined up like, no, we're not going to have this man again. I want to see that kind of action. Thank you. Thank you, Marquis, for the work that you all are doing. Again, I'm there to support you in any way. My goal through GPI is first train everyone how to win contracts first as a small business. So if they take away the certification, okay, y'all can take it away. But at least we know how to compete as a small business. We know you're not going to take those certifications away. Yes, we are at our 1 o'clock mark. Does anyone have any questions before I close out? But this was so educational. Thank you. Does
Yeah.
anyone have any questions before we close out? Did y'all enjoy this? This is information. Give me a show of hands. Look, very good, very good.
Good.
So
Right.
thank you, Marquis. Again, if y'all need assistance with taxes, please support him through his franchise and become members of the Atlanta Black Chamber.
Yes, please check us out.
Let's get this going. So again, thank you, Marquis.
Thank you so much, Paula. So looking forward to keeping in close contact with you. And I'm sure we'll talk sometime soon. Thanks,
All
everybody.
right.
Enjoyed it.
All
Have a good
all
one.
right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Mhm.